Hello, we're going to have a look now at how to add a texture onto our background without having to shoot another texture or find another texture on Google that you're allowed to use and all of that stuff. There's actually a technique you can use in Photoshop. So let's have a look. So first thing we're going to do, duplicate our layer, and we're going to go up to filter and we're going to render clouds. Now, when you render clouds, you're going to get this weird texture that comes up, randomizes it every time, which is beautiful. Now, this is going to look really weird. It's far too textured. It's definitely not a grungy kind of effect like we want. So what we want to do is we only want a little segment, a tiny little bit of this from the middle. The way I do it, if you click Control T to bring up your transform tools, you've got it locked at the top, so it's 100% either way. And I just take that to 400, which is going to bring it right in. And I click enter on there, and it's going to give me a very large file for a few seconds, but it's also going to give me a much closer in texture. You see, now I can choose which bit of this I want. I can maneuver around and choose exactly where I want to be. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the layer setting now to either overlay or soft light. It's going to be different depending on how light or dark your image is. For me, it almost always is soft light, but occasionally overlay is the one that you need. Now we can see that we can see her through it, and we can still play around and move our texture a little bit if we want to. It's going to be more effective in the shadows and less effective in the highlights in the middle. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that opacity right down, and I'm going to turn it down to, it's normally somewhere between 10 to 40%, but again, it depends on your image. For an image that's a lot lighter, you're going to need to turn it up a bit more. I normally end up hovering around the sort of 20%, 10% sort of mark, because I think this texture looks quite nice. Gives a slight smoky feel. And the last thing is we're going to mask it. Now you can do this two ways. You can either mask it and mask your subject with a black brush, mask them out. As you can see, it's starting to draw down here. Or you can invert it and you can start drawing your texture in and bringing the texture back again. As you can see, it's drawing it back. If I put that on 100%, you'll see a bit more coming around in there. Ooh, helps if I put the right brush setting on. There we go. You can see the texture drawing in, and you can choose exactly where you want it. Now, this is quite a forgiving texture. You can actually go a little bit over and not have to be so neat, and it's very hard for you to be able to see it on your subject. It really doesn't show up very much. So I can actually be quite clumsy with my masking in here. And I can just make sure it's not on the face. I can't see any, but we'll take it off there. And that's my texture. Really making that image stand out, making that image shine. Now, the beauty of this is a texture that Photoshop generated, so there's no credits or copyright issues at all. Also, every time you do this, it's going to generate the texture slightly differently, which is going to be brilliant, because then every single of your images, you're not going to notice the same part of the texture or the same pattern. Now, the very last thing I do to blend this in, this works perfectly. I think this looks really nice as it is. But if I just click on this part of my layer here with the clouds and click Control B, I can change the color a little bit of those clouds if I want to. Now I'm going to, on this one, add a little bit more blue just in there. Okay, on that, just to match the background, because this way it's going to blend that little bit more rather than it's going to stand out as sort of a grey on top of whatever color that background is. Now that's done that there. So we've now got that texture off and on. We're simply going to flatten our layer. And I think we're done with that. That looks brilliant. So thanks for joining me for the texture, and I'll see you for the next video about contour.